Peter Asmus is a force of nature. He is an inspirational speaker and one of the only entrepreneurs using crowdfunding to bring cannabis investment through real estate to investors on his platform GreenZone360. Welcome to the National Real Estate Forum.org podcast, episode 238. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Dr. Adam Gower, and this is the National Real Estate Forum.org, where I speak to the leaders of the crowdfund real estate industry so that you can learn how to raise capital, build wealth, and earn passive income from crowdfund real estate deals. I get a lot of questions from people who ask me, what is real estate crowdfunding? What is real estate crowdfunding? After they've asked that question, they then ask me, how much can I make? Right? In investing. So whether you've heard of it before or not, check this out. I recently taught an in-person class of 60 of the brightest real estate students in the country about the origins and background to real estate crowdfunding, and I had them compile a list of all the sites in the country where you can invest in crowdfund real estate deals. Now, I'm sure my guest today won't mind my sharing this list with you because his site is really unique among all of the sites out there, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. So to get your free download of the entire list of real estate crowdfunding sites in the United States, go to the show notes page at the National Real Estate Forum.org website, nreforum.org/greenzone, and you'll find a link to that list at the very top of the page. Looking at all the sites online is a great way of conducting a quick survey of what is available out there, what kind of returns you can get, and you may have about the state of the industry today. Now, my guest today, Peter Asmus, is an extraordinary person. Remember what they said about the gold rush, that people who made the money were those that made the spades, right? Not the ones that dug and tried to find gold. Well, adopting the same principles for the emerging cannabis green rush, Pete has set up the only site on the internet, as far as I know, that offers the opportunity to invest in the real estate of cannabis at GreenZone360. So go to the show notes page for today's episode at nreforum.org/greenzone for a link to Pete's site and to download a list of what I think is actually every crowdfund website in the country as compiled by my class of 60 students. And let me know if you can find one that is doing something that comes even remotely close to what Peter Asmus is doing at GreenZone360 in opening up the cannabis industry for real estate to the crowd.
When I was a kid, my parents were both probably middle class, but I just had an issue, I guess, listening. And so I was kicked out, and I lived on the streets when I was 16 years old. And it was definitely a different day back then. Like now, I can't even imagine that. But back then it was, look, you're not listening. You're not doing what you're told. You gotta go out. You gotta get out of here. And so literally from the time I was 16, I never lived with my parents again. I ended up going into a group home, and it really, I think to some degree, developed the desire and drive in me to prove to everybody that I was worth being there, right? And I know I'm getting kind of mushy right off the bat, but really I think that was my driver. And I think that has a big driver in anybody that's truly successful. There's got to be something that's eating away at you that's making you want to do better and better and go for it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yes. So what do you do? I mean,
about 3-4 years.
What do you do? I mean, you're in a group home. How did you start to make a living?
So I ended up, because I had nowhere to go, I had no family for support at that point, I ended up going into the military. And I was in the Navy for about 3-4 years. I lived in Hawaii, and it really gave me a good foundation to build upon. And so when I got out, I got into some electronics. I was doing some supervising stuff, and it really just kind of kept me wanting to do more and more and more. And I realized I needed to go back to college to do that. And so I ended up going to Portland State. I ended up getting, I almost got a BA, and I ended up starting a sketch comedy group while I was in college. And that really kind of transitioned me for the next 4 or 5 years, because I was out running around developing and really being an entrepreneur at a young age, going, how do we get this comedy group to make money, and how do we live? And so we did that. And as we kept going, we kind of hit a block wall of where we couldn't get really any farther. And so I ended up coming back down to California, and I said, I've got to make a change. I want to make more out of my life. I know that I'm destined to be something. And so as we kept going through and I was working, I ended up working at a gym and running a gym. And I just kept seeing the same thing over and over in every single job I had. And it was always, as I was working at a company, I would shoot to the top, and then I would get frustrated because I was limited. And that's when I kind of realized I needed to be an entrepreneur. And I think you can identify with that, right?
Right. Yes. How did you concoct your first business?
So I started working at a car dealership, and I love this story because I'm working at this car dealership and I hate it. I'm doing very well. I was a top salesman, but I hated it because in a car dealership, I've got to tell you your car is worth less than it is in order for us to make a profit. And I didn't like that. So I started writing down every day, I'm going to meet somebody that is going to change my life. I will meet somebody that is going to take me out of here. I'm going to meet somebody who's going to change my life. Literally kept writing that. 3 months later, I met a gentleman who brought me on to a company called Aquagens, who at the time had one distributor that they were selling at. They had done $5,000 that whole entire year. And the year that I came on, when I came on, within that year, we had already gotten up to 500,000. We were across the country to Texas, and we were blowing up. And then my son got brain cancer, and they kind of shut me down. And that's the point I realized I needed to be an entrepreneur. I needed to be able to control my own destination because I never wanted to be in a situation again where I had to work and I couldn't take care of my family. I couldn't be there for my family. And so at that point, because of everything that I was doing, I ended up traveling 2 weeks out of the year working for like Robert Allen or Armando Montalongo, these real estate gurus. And I was out every weekend doing this. And the more I was doing that, the more I started getting that same feeling like when I was at the car dealership where, man, all these people talking about what they're doing, they're not really doing it. They're just talking about it. I'm selling you on how to repair houses, but I'm not actually repairing houses because I think it's too dangerous right now. And that mentality was insane to me. And so at that point, I started a REA. We ended up getting 50 REAs across the country. And it was really all about how do we help people. There were two things. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because it leads into where I'm at now. Mm-hmm. When I was traveling around the country, working with all of these different gurus, there were two things that kept coming up with every investor that came in. And the two things were they needed to make money now. The two things were they needed to make money now, but they needed to make money long term. And really what these programs would offer them was one or the other. Look, you either can get rentals and then all your money's in this rental and now you're making $700 or $800 a month, or you can do this flip and hopefully this flip goes well, because if it doesn't, you're going to lose everything. But if it does, well, great, now you have money, but you got to do it again. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. It's interesting.
And so
okay.
My thing was, how do we solve that? How do we solve that problem? And that kind of leads me up to GreenZone. Can we talk about that?
No, say that again. Up to what?
It led up to GreenZone.
Oh, GreenZone. Sorry, I didn't hear you on the line. My bad. Sorry. GreenZone.
No.
Yes. Okay, right.
Because my thing ever since that was, how do I solve those two problems? How do I solve those two problems for our investors? And cannabis, when we looked at what was happening in the country, we started seeing a trend. Colorado was kind of like its own little thing, but then it was Washington, then it was Washington, D.C., then it was Oregon, and you're having all these other states coming online. And really what that was showing was this green rush, right? It was showing the ability of states to start making their own decision despite what federal government was doing. And a lot of times people right now go, well, what is federal government going to do? You know, what are the repercussions? And the reality is, well, the repercussions could be anything because it's a Schedule I drug. However, if you look at the past, for the last 5 years, Colorado has been making millions and millions of dollars. In fact, in 2016, 85% of their income came from the black market. Came from the black market, meaning that 85% of that money was going anyways. It was being spent on cannabis, except it was being put in the market, meaning that 85% of that money was going anyways. It was being spent on cannabis, except it was being put into drug dealers' pockets. It was getting sent out of the country. Now it's staying in the country. And my biggest thing is whether you're for cannabis or against it, wouldn't you want to control it to ensure that it's as safe as possible? And really everybody's answer is a big yes, right?
Okay, so how did you connect this to real estate? Very interesting. But now you've created a real estate business out of this, haven't you? So tell me that story.
Correct.
How did that come together?
This is the beautiful part. So going back to the gold rush, because a lot of people are really assimilating the California green rush with the gold rush, right? And when I started thinking about that, I started thinking, well, who made money in the gold rush? Very few people making gold or finding gold made money. Who made all the money? The people that were renting the hotels, the people that were selling the shovels. And so
That's the classic, right?
how do we find the golden shovels? Where are the golden shovels in cannabis? And here's where they are. There are two things that you need in order to have a license to sell cannabis. Cannabis, by the way, by 2022 will be the largest impactor to our economy, period. It'll be the largest single contributor to our economy because, and I know I'm getting sidetracked, but this is a really important point.
Okay.
People think, well, cannabis is just cannabis, and it isn't. When you look at Desert Hot Springs, it's got 800 acres being developed. These 800 acres are going to be employing a ton of people. Where are they going to stay? What are they going to do? Where are they going to eat? All of that infrastructure needs to be done, and all of that infrastructure has nothing to do with cannabis. Cannabis is just the catalyst. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And that's what's happening. So jumping back now, what do we need? Our real estate and testing labs. And here's why. In order to get a license in California, you must have real estate. It doesn't mean you have to own it, but it means that you have to have a location that has approved that the owner or you have told the state, this is what's happening in this location, and they've approved for that to happen in that location. You can't just grow cannabis anywhere. You have to have it in a green zone, which is why we named our company GreenZone. So if it has to be in this green zone, and if there's only a limited number, then that now becomes a shovel. Because we can be a landholder, we can own this property. You're getting 2 to 3 times the lease rates. And I mean, we're talking right now, our current project, we've got calculated at $178 a square foot for sales, and they're already comps at 200.
Oh, for marijuana manufacturing?
For sales, and they're already comps at 200.
Oh, for marijuana manufacturing locations?
Correct, for these locations. So literally a half a mile up the road from our location right now that we're in the middle of entitling, they're already selling the properties for $200 a square foot. Our whole entire basis is off of 178. So we've literally got another $25 times 162,000 square feet that is in there as a buffer.
So what's the entitlement?
So many buffers, but
what's the entitlement process like there out in Desert Hot Springs?
So entitlement can be really weird. You know, you've got like, for instance, and I know you're not asking me this, but just for comparison's sake, we did high-end flips in Laguna Beach. They meet once a year. I mean, man, talk about trying to get things approved. That'd be nuts. Desert Hot Springs is meeting all the time. Their city almost went bankrupt in 2013 and 2001. And so when you're looking at a city that's almost gone bankrupt twice, now has a $50 million surplus, they're very excited to get cannabis in there because it's making a difference in their community.
Download the most current list of all crowdfund real estate websites available in the industry today at the show notes page for today's episode at nreforum.org/GreenZone. And let me know if there are any websites that I've missed that give access to the exploding world of real estate cannabis investment in the way that Pete does.
Interesting. Okay, so that's obviously a good sign. So I'll tell you what, so now you've got, so your idea is to build the buildings and get them. So you're going to get the license for the use, are you? And this it's out to manufacturers. Is that how it works? Or growers? Is that how it works?
So No, so this is what we did. We wanted to be really smart about this. The reality is there is a timeline on this, right? Everything's not going to have, it's all about supply and demand. Right now, there's nothing. So everybody can get a higher dollar amount. But as time goes on, that number is going to go down. And so what we wanted to do was mitigate our risk. The way that we did that was to capitalize on both of the things happening right now. So where we're building 10 buildings out in the desert, we're going to sell 8 of them. By us selling 8 of them, that puts us at about an $11 million profit. And we own the other 2 buildings free and clear now. So not only did we make a great profit, but we now have 2 buildings that we can lease. And this is the whole idea of how I wanted to solve that initial problem with investors. They're able to get a kick out right now of like a flip. But at the same time, we're holding 2 properties, now getting cash flow. And when we end up selling those in 8 years, they get another big hit. It ends up turning like a $100,000 investment into, I think it's like 331% over 10 years, just because of everything that we're doing in combination. And again, this is always about how do we solve the investors' cash now and cash flow problem. We also made it so that they can get out after any project. Our goal is to do this for about 6 years, but we know that things come up. Somebody could have a parent that passes away. Somebody could have a child that needs something. So we wanted to make it so that after each project, you could get your initial investment back as well. It was all about how do we make this as accessible to the masses as possible, which is why we ended up doing a RegA as well, so that we could not only have accredited investors, but we could also create an opportunity and platform for anyone to invest in this cannabis boom.
You're into my fairway. Let me ask you a little bit before we do drill down on that a little bit further, though. I'm intrigued by the deal itself. So what is the timeline, Pete? You're in entitlements, so you own some acreage out in the desert. What's the timeline for? Are you projecting for the end of entitlements and then getting your construction permits, building, and actually generating revenue from growers?
We are looking at 2019. We will have payouts. We already have 2 companies that want to literally buy the entire development from us. If we do that, we're obviously not going to be holding anything, but we will be moving that into another property that we're looking at acquiring that's literally right along the freeway. So if that happens, then that's fine. All that does is turn the 11 million into, I think it's like 15 million or something. So everybody just makes a lot more money right now, which I don't think anybody will have a problem with. And I think it's like 15 million or something. So everybody just makes a lot more money right now, which I don't think anybody will have a problem with. If not, we have about 15 people that want to either buy a building or lease one of the condos. Here's the other thing that we did to really make this accessible. The reality is 57% of all cultivators are mom and pop organizations earning less than $500,000 a year. They don't understand real estate. They don't understand development, and they certainly can't put a large project like this together. So what we did was we have 162,000 square feet in 10 buildings. Those are subdivided. In fact, that's one of the processes we're going through right now is getting a track map, because once we have that, we can pre-sell. But we're subdividing those into 50 condos. Now, the rules are you can either have a 5, 10, or 20,000 square foot license right now. However, you can't just have 5,000 square feet. You also need 10 to 20% overage for offices and bathrooms. So the reason we cut these into 3,000 square foot increments was because if you buy 2, you're at a 5,000. If you buy 4, you're at a 10,000 license. If you buy 8, you're at a 20,000 license. So we wanted to make it so that it was maneuverable, right, and flexible. The other thing that is awesome about this, if anybody has ever done developing at all, one of the scariest things with developing is what color do we paint the door? What color do we paint the outside if you're doing residential, right? How do we look? We know all the money's in the kitchen and the bathroom, and so we've got to make sure we do all this great stuff. We're building vanilla shells. I'm not even putting in HVAC because I don't know who's going to be a cultivator, who's going to be an edible company, who's going to be a testing lab, who's going to be a manufacturing lab. A manufacturing, testing lab, and edible company in no way need the same amount of HVAC as a cultivator. So by doing this, we allow the best. We're doing metal buildings. They'll either be metal or panel. There'll be a step up from greenhouse, a step down from tilt ups.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is where they're at, they're the best for the price point, and they're going to be up in 6 to 9 weeks. We can literally have a building up. And so that's why we know as soon as we get through this process, we've already got people lined up. One of the other aspects we want to do is pre-sell the whole development. So that way, again, we mitigate as much risk. We've got so many different safety factors in, from calculating cost to build at $73 versus our actual at $38, so that we have a $4 million buffer in build just in case there's something comes up. Because as we all know, something always comes up, right? So we just want to have enough buffers that we cover all those something that comes up, and we're still able to give more return. It's always about under-promising, over-delivering, and I'll stop talking and let you talk about that.
All right, thanks. Good. You'll cultivation. Good. You'll save me grief at home for not interrupting you. All right. So let me ask you one final question then, because I didn't quite understand. You're not getting the license, but you're in a zone that has been approved for marijuana cultivation by the city of Desert Hot Springs. Sorry, I don't really know much about this space.
No, that's okay. So
then your tenants will get their own licenses, or is your facility licensed in some way?
So the way that it works with cannabis is in the area, the city has to allot that for a cannabis cultivation zone or a cannabis zone. That gives you the CUP, the conditional use permit. The conditional use permit stays with the building. So whether they stay, they leave, if we're renting it to them and they leave, the CUP stays. However, you have to have a CUP in order to get a... So the license will stay with the business, the CUP stays with the building. Does that make sense?
Yes, got it. Okay. All right, so now let's talk about how you're financing this thing. So what are the kind of the high-level numbers, and then what gave you the idea to crowdfund it, which essentially you're doing using Jobs Act regulations A+ and Reg D. What have been the challenges, Pete? Let's start right at the beginning. How did you embark on the process of raising capital from the crowd?
So we own the largest real estate groups on LinkedIn, and we have a large database. And we had been doing and raising money for traditional real estate the whole time for other people, and then doing some of our own stuff. I was in a car with somebody talking about how their parents had gotten ripped off, and I just all of a sudden it dawned on me that, man, California was legalizing things. Let's shift everything we're doing into this opportunity. We're talking about something that's been illegal for over 80 years and has only grown in popularity. We're talking about a product that literally, we just read this in a law firm, that it has, as for the avoidance of any doubt, there is not a single recorded incident of anyone anywhere ever overdosing on marijuana. And that's huge. When you're talking about the opioid crisis and all of the opioids that are used for pain management that get them addicted, that they can overdose on, that people do overdose on. And then you've got marijuana that is a great pain supplement that can help it, and that doesn't have those same effects. It's just crazy. So we went, look, we know that there's going to be an uphill battle. We know that there's still going to have to be people that change their mind, that realize that this is not a Schedule I drug like everybody's trying to say, but let's really shift. So we started pushing all of our doing, and we've had mixed reviews. Some people have said, that they don't like it for this reason or that reason. But again, a lot of those reasons are stuck from the 50s, from the Nixon era. They're stuck from inaccurate information. And that's the sad part.
What they don't like is that you've shifted into cannabis. That's
Correct.
Kind of the pushback you're getting. What was the connection between wanting to build a plant, which is one thing, and figuring out how to actually sell it to everybody? I mean, was using Reg D or Regulation A+? How did you come across that option?
I wanted the ability to allow everybody in. The reality is, when you look at some of the big players in this, they're MedMen. They just spent $684 million on acquisitions, the largest cannabis acquisition in history so far. But I mean, it hasn't been that long. It hasn't been that long. But when you look at that, it's like, what normal person can get into that deal? They can't. Those guys are going to make a killing off of that acquisition, but typically people don't have $600 and something million. So what could we do? And that's why we put together the RegA, because we wanted to put together a real 420 fund that anybody could get into for only $420. So that's our minimum, 100 shares at $404.20. Now, we have a lot of people that buy 1,000 or 10,000 shares. I mean, they don't, it's not the minimum. But what it does allow is that single mom that is still working paycheck to paycheck to be able to make a difference in her future. It allows that 20-something-year-old, that millennial, to be able to do something and make an advance towards their future. That's what we wanted to create with the RegA. We wanted to allow everybody access to the same awesome opportunity that Tip get.
Are you doing a parallel Reg D, are you, as well, for just accredited investors?
Yeah,
okay.
The minimum on that is $50,000, but it's very awesome.
Well, tell me about that. Yeah. So is there any difference between what somebody in your Reg A or your Reg D get relative to the other?
Yeah. So the Reg D is going to be, $50,000 minimum. That's going to be the payout that we were talking about. On the Reg A, that's going to also be testing labs. So the Reg D only focuses on real estate, doesn't touch the plan in any way, shape, or form. The Reg A will focus on the real estate, so it will be able to lend to our Reg D to be able to capitalize and see some of those returns, right? If we're going to have 120% return on our Reg D, why would I not want to put some of the Reg A money in there so all of our investors there can get a piece of that return as well? In addition to that, the Reg A will also work on testing labs because we're seeing a huge deficit in testing labs. If you're involved in testing labs, you can't be in any other aspect of the business. So nobody wants to do it because they all want to grow. They all want to have their brands or whatever, their strains. For us, it was how do we really make money and really ensure quality? And by us being in testing labs, we can make sure that everything that everybody's getting is what they think they're getting. We can ensure consistency and ensure the continued safety of the product.
What have been the biggest challenges, Pete, on both sides, both the Reg A and is the Reg A, is that already issued? You've already issued that.
The Reg A is in paper setup. We're actually getting it all ready for its official launch in November. So anybody that was to be hearing this now would be getting a early spot in on that Reg A.
Oh, perfect.
So haven't really had, the biggest challenge with the Reg A was just the time it took to get together. Seriously, we've been working on this for about 11 months now, putting it together because there's just so much involved and it's very expensive. But again, it's the platform that allows us to allow anybody to invest in, and we wanted to create that opportunity for everyone.
Well, I think it's fantastic, but you've said something very interesting. So is Reg A, you said, is very expensive. What are the big costs associated with doing the Reg A?
They could be anywhere from just setting it up can be anywhere from 50 to 100,000. Then we had to get an audit. He's not paying attention. We had to get an audit of a bank account that wasn't even in existence. It was like $2,000. There was all these miscellaneous things to get it set up so that it was as transparent and see-through as possible. Because that's one of the big things is the Reg A. Our destination for it is to be a publicly traded company.
Interesting. And then what about marketing other than LinkedIn? Do you do any other kind of marketing or are you planning to do other kinds of marketing?
Yep. So we just hired a CMO. She is working on our whole, and that's part of what our November launch is because we're getting all of the pieces put together to really have a solid marketing plan to go out because this fund is about a $42 million fund. So we really want everything together. We're planning on doing a few different states, but the end goal of this Regulation A fund is to be the largest cannabis testing lab in the country, period.
Where will the testing labs be? Where are you going to base those?
Well, we're looking at, obviously we have our spot in DHS. We're looking at Lake Elsinore. I think there was one or two other states, Florida, looking at different areas that aren't already greenlit. So the thing we don't want to do is go into Colorado that's already been going for 5 years. Look, they've already got all their stuff dialed in. We want to go to where it's just about to break, where it just got medically approved. You know what I mean? Before it gets recreational, because that's when we get the ability to get in and start to help also shape some of the legislation so that we can ensure the prosperity of the program.
So do you find so let's actually talk about that in the context of crowdfunding again. If you're doing RegA and you're raising, your minimum's $420, is that right? Did I hear you right?
Correct, yep.
In the RegA, okay. So $420, that's, really everybody above the age of 18, basically, right? In the United States. So if you do that, do you think that there's any potential to co-opt investors in the lobbying effort for legislative change as well? People that have a vested interest, who have invested, to, have them part of the process to change legislation?
It's funny. We've actually had a lot of our investors that get involved want to be more involved. Like, they really like the idea of what's happening, and they want to be a part of it. So I see all kinds of abilities. The thing about it is cannabis at this point has literally probably touched 90% of the country's lives in some way, whether it be their grandma that was using it for this, their child that was using it for this. I mean, one of our newest employees that we brought in, I would have never guessed knew anything about cannabis, but they had breast cannabis to get through that treatment. And it's like, this really does impact every single aspect of our lives and every person. So we want to create the reality and the opportunity for people to be able to do that. If I could do one other thing, it would be to create a delivery service, because that's absolutely the way it's going.
That's interesting. Now you're definitely moving into handling the product, right?
Correct.
Which is a different,
that would be a different fund.
For the testing labs, do they have to be? They can only operate in states where cannabis is legal. They can't operate in states where it's not legal. Okay.
Well, they can operate in states where it's not legal as long as they're not testing cannabis, right? Because the reality is there's a lot of testing labs that are starting to shift from food to cannabis because they get paid a higher dollar amount. But some can't, because if they're on a federal, contract. But here's what's going to change. When one of the other things that we found that just blew me away was White House to unveil federal cannabis reform very soon. So Dana Rohrabacher, from Republican from California, is talking about that after the midterm elections, that the White House has dedicated itself to re-engineering, I guess, or what did they say specifically? I've been reassured that the president intends on keeping his campaign promise of fixing the marijuana situation. So, I mean, I honestly believe by 2020, if federally it's not legal, that is going to be the major point. It's going to be cannabis, because you're talking about California. By the end of the year, we'll have it's the 6th largest economy in the world. And we were looking at doing, $2.8 billion without having it legalized. Now that it's legalized, and look, at the end of the day, it's all about money when it comes to politics, when it comes to Washington. And if Washington sees this much money coming in from a product that has 0 deaths on the record, do you know to die from cannabis, it's 1,000 times your effective level. So if it takes you, let's just say, if anybody out there has ever seen like the 100 milligram bars, it would take you 100,000 milligrams to get a lethal dosage. Nobody would be able to intake that much. You pass out. You know what I mean? Like, it's just
the mind boggles, right?
Yeah, it's just crazy. So, the fact that there's a lot more acceptance is great, but there still needs to be more understanding that, look, here's the biggest thing. Me personally, I lost 100 pounds because I started using cannabis. I started 3 different companies. Cannabis doesn't make you fat. It doesn't make you lazy. It doesn't make you stupid. It doesn't companies. Cannabis doesn't make you fat. It doesn't make you lazy. It doesn't make you stupid. It doesn't make you any of those things. Those were just, I hate to sound like that guy in the corner, but those are just lies that we were told as kids by the government in order to control a situation. And, you know, it is what it is. But none of those are true. It's not a gateway drug. It's not a drug that makes you lazy. It's not a drug that makes you stupid. None of it.
All right, let me ask you one last question on this subject, and then I've got 3 wrap-up questions for you. Okay.
You got it.
So is there? So you're doing you've done a Reg D, doing a RegA, which is very exciting. We should definitely keep in touch on that. That's coming right up. That's fantastic. Is there anyone else doing real estate cannabis crowdfunding, as far as you're aware?
So, yes and no, right? There are 3 other companies that RegA funds. One was approved in 2015 with the intention of leasing real estate to cannabis operators, but nothing ever became of that company. So they're basically gone. Then you've got 2 that earlier this year obtained RegA funds. One was High Times, so it's a magazine and it's focused on publishing magazines and it's trade shows, so nothing to do with what we're talking about. And then the other one is all about the development of products with cannabis in them. So again, not focused on the real estate aspect or the lab aspect. We are the only Regulation A company fund that does that. And the other really cool part is there's only a handful of regulation funds that have ever been even approved. I mean, maybe 25, right? I mean, it's not like you've got a ton of them. So they're difficult to get. There's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through. And it's just an amazing opportunity for us to have been able to work through it and get it.
Personally, that make you productive and your business successful?
One, every morning I probably wake up and I'll probably wake up about an hour before I actually get out of bed. And I reaffirm how awesome the day is going to be. And I mean, whether I in my heart believe it or not, I repeat it over and over again. Today is going to be an awesome day. Today we're going to get a lot done. Whatever it happens to be, because I really believe mindset is a big, big piece. The other thing, one of the other pieces is I love this book, I think it was The One Thing by Keller Williams or Keller. I don't remember exactly who it was, but every day going, what is the one thing that can move me the farthest? And if every day I do that one thing, even if nothing else works out, I can keep moving. I can keep moving forward. And then one thing, even if nothing else works out, I can keep moving. I can keep moving forward. And then the last thing, I guess the third thing that I do is if I ever get stuck, I change positions. Like, so if I'm working on one company and I'm just getting frustrated or I'm not moving the way I want and I'm getting confused, I'll stop doing this and I'll start going out and building obstacles just to get my brain reset. I think that sometimes people will do something and if they don't get it right, they just keep doing it instead of giving yourself a break and then coming back with a fresh perspective.
How do you get that fresh perspective, Pete?
A lot of times it's doing something completely different. Like completely, if I'm working on editing a video together, I'll go out and I'll start hammering and making a chair. I mean, that's not real, but like creating, a rock wall, right? Just working with my hands, brain start to readjust itself. And then all of a sudden, boom, I have an idea. And I'm like, oh, this will work. And then I come in and I do it.
Those are really interesting, very positive outlooks. I really appreciate that. So let me ask you now, question number 2. What has been the hardest lesson you have learned in business or in real estate? The hardest lesson you've learned?
It's probably that you can't blame anybody else. I guess that would be it. The reality is everything is my fault. And when you can accept that everything is your fault, you can do something about it. But most people blame other people for everything that's going wrong. And when you blame other people, there's nothing you can do. Look, if somebody else put you in jail, you can't get out of jail because they put you there. But if you can accept the fact that what you did got you in jail, now you can change. And I'm using jail as a metaphor, but you can now change your habits to ensure that you don't get back there again. But when we don't accept responsibility, we can't do anything about the outcome.
Yeah, it's a fascinating perspective, that. You really got me thinking. about that one. All right. So here's my last of the 3 sign-off questions. If you could give one piece of advice to somebody who has not yet invested in real estate online, but is considering investing in real estate, what would that advice be?
I think that the real advice is, if you want your life to be different, you have to do different things. And it doesn't mean that they're always going to work. In fact, the one constant reality in this world is the only way to truly succeed is to fail about 150 to 200 times on the way getting there. And most people don't understand that. Failure is the building blocks of 600 times on the way getting there. And most people don't understand that. Failure is the building blocks of success. Most people think failure is the end. Failure is the race is finished, and it's just not. It's like running a hurdle, right? If you're doing a hurdle race, every hurdle you go over is just an obstacle. It doesn't mean it's the end of the race. And a lot of people view it that way, that they have to understand that failure is just part of it. And if you can realize that the more you fail, the closer you're getting to yes, in a positive way, right? Not just being stupid, but really doing everything you can to get it. You're going to learn every time. And the only way to be successful is to fail your way there.
I've interviewed dozens upon dozens of some of the brightest leaders in the real estate industry today, and I have to say that the answers that Peter Asmus gave to really is GreenZone. To find out more about Pete and his real estate opportunity in the cannabis industry, and to download the full list of crowdfund real estate sites so you can see that he really is unique in this field. My next guest is Michael Campbell of the Carlton Group. I've been following the Carlton Group for over 10 years, since I was brought into East West Bank at the end of 2007. Carlton Group's deal sizes are ginormous, and Michael is a consummate gentleman and a real pleasure not only to talk to but to listen to as well. So be sure not to miss that episode by subscribing to the series, the National Real Estate Forum.org website, nreforum.org, and hitting any of the links that I've included about halfway down the homepage. Thanks for tuning in, and thank you also to Peter Asmus of GreenZone360 for sharing your time with me today. Until next time, this is Dr. Adam Gower signing off. Adam Gower signing off.